Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the program evaluation series. Today's topic is Title III, the English Language Acquisition, Language Enhancement, and Academic Achievement Act. Believe it or not, that is the short version of the title. So today, our agenda is as follows. We will be going over the program evaluation series overview, the statutory requirements, the program evaluation process, then having a look at reasonable, necessary, allowable, and allocable, some examples, and then closing with other program evaluation series sessions that will be continuing. So the program evaluation series overview. What is this? How many are you doing? And why are you in fact offering it? This is the series description. I'm not going to read it all to you. Just know that it is required at both the federal and state levels that you actually evaluate or report on your programs that you are implementing within your LEA. And that is why we're offering the program evaluation series. There are a total of 9. We started on April 9th, and we will be concluding on June 4th with Title V, Part B, the Rural Education Initiative, and that includes your RLIS as well as your SRSA. We're offering this because we want to make sure that if you have additional questions and you just need this kind of on-demand assistance approach, you could use these webinars as an opportunity to learn more about the statute, figure out what you are required to do per the statute, and then kind of hear some examples of common questions that we get in regards to being able to charge a fund or a program to the overall federal funding source. So statutory requirements. My apologies, I need to update this. It should say Title III, Part A, and this is going to be your English Language Acquisition, Enhancement, and Academic Achievement Act. If you want to see this in its entirety outside of the statute, and of course you can go to ESSA for that, you also want to make sure you have a look at the e-grants. The ESSA consolidated application itself actually has in the assurances provision or assurances part of the application the list of everything that you're saying or assuring that you are going to be doing to fulfill this overall title funding requirement. So Section 3102 gives you an overall purpose. The purpose is to help ensure that English learners, including immigrant children and youth, attain English proficiency and develop high levels of academic achievement in English. To assist all English learners, including immigrant children and youth, to achieve at high levels in academic subjects so that all English learners can meet the same challenging state academic standards that all children are expected to meet. To assist teachers, including preschool teachers, principals, and other school leaders, state educational agencies, local educational agencies, and schools in establishing, implementing, and sustaining effective language instruction educational programs designed to assist in teaching English learners, including immigrant children and youth. And the last two, to assist teachers, principals, and school leaders, and local education agencies to enhance their capacity to provide effective instructional programs to prepare English learners, including immigrant children and youth, to enter all instructional settings. And 5, to promote parental, family, and community participation in language instruction educational programs for the parents, families, and communities of English learners. Now that's the general purpose overall of Title III. What I want to show you next is Section 3115, which are your subgrants to eligible entities. So that's kind of us, like our LEAs, what our specific purposes under Title III. So for subgrantees, which includes us, we are charged with developing and implementing new language instruction educational programs and academic content instructional programs for English learners and immigrant children and youth, including programs of early childhood education programs, elementary school programs, and secondary school programs. Number 2 says carrying out highly focused, innovative, locally designed activities to expand or enhance existing language instruction, educational programs, and academic content instruction programs for English learners and immigrant children and youth. And the last 2, implementing within individual school-wide programs for restructuring, reforming, and upgrading all relevant programs, activities, and operations relating to language instruction, educational programs, and academic content instruction for English learners and immigrant children and youth. And the 4th statement of purpose for LEAs or subgrantees, implementing within the entire jurisdiction of an LEA agency-wide programs for restructuring, reforming, and upgrading all relevant programs, activities, and operations relating to language instruction, educational programs, and academic content instruction for English learners and immigrant children and youth. So you'll see here that it's very similar to the overall purpose of Title III, which goes to state educational agencies as well. But this gives you just a little bit more specificity when it comes to what we are as LEAs, our purpose in using and implementing a Title III program. Now, there are some things that we are required to do if we're receiving this funding, and they're called your required subgrantee activities. So I wanted to show you this because I want you to know, and I'm not going to read through all of it verbatim, I'm going to kind of summarize it. Just know that if you are accepting this funding, according to statute, there are some things that we are required, you must do if you were taking this funding. Keeping in mind that overall, the purpose is to increase the English proficiency of English learners by providing effective language instruction, educational programs that meet the needs of English learners. We want to be able to show that we're demonstrating success in increasing this student population's language proficiency and their academic achievement. In addition, we are required to provide professional development to classroom teachers, including teachers in classroom settings that are not the settings of language instruction educational programs. So it doesn't mean that I just have to provide professional development specific to this population only if they're actually facilitating the language instruction. We are required to provide it regardless of the kind of instruction that's being offered by that teacher. So they could be the math teacher, it could be the science teacher. It's not just specific to the language instruction teacher. In addition, principals and other school leaders are required to do this. Overall, the goal is to make sure that we're improving instruction and assessment of this population. You're also required to make sure you're enhancing the ability of all who are serving these stakeholders, and that's through your curriculum and assessment practices and overall instructional practices. In addition, it says increasing the children's language proficiency and their subject matter knowledge, making sure that we are providing professional development that is not just that one day or short-term workshops and conferences, with the intent of having deep, systemic, positive, lasting change on the overall performance of the educator in the classroom. You see like a little notion there that says here, except that the subparagraph shall not apply, yada, yada, yada. What they mean here and what this says is, in short, you can provide and use Title III funding for this, your Title III Part A funding for it, as long as you're not using that funding to work with a specific teacher because of a specific teacher's need based on their professional growth plan. Sometimes they're also called TINAs, teacher in need of assistance. You can use this funding to provide and increase the professional development if it has a positive, lasting impact on the performance, as long as it's not I'm paying for a specific teacher as a result of what their professional or personal growth plan says. Number 3, to provide and implement other effective activities and strategies that enhance or supplement the language instruction. That can also include your parent, family, and community engagement, as well as other strategies that can help to coordinate and align with related programs. That's what you are required to do according to ESSA if you accepted the funding. In addition, you have to create what's called a local plan. Now, within your consolidated application, within the ESSA consolidated application, there was a portion of the application that basically says, I am agreeing or I am attesting that I'm going to do these following things. Some of those things come directly, well, all of those things come directly from statute, from section 3116. It's what they call your requirements of the local plan. I want to show this to you because if you are not embedding these things within your plan, as you plan for next year and you're looking at program evaluation of your Title III program, you definitely want to make sure that these following pieces can be found within your local plan because it is a requirement under ESSA. For your plan, if you are actually taking the funding, you have to make sure that you're describing the effective programs and activities, including language instruction, educational programs, proposed to be developed, implemented, and administered that will help English learners increase their English language proficiency and meet the challenging state academic standards. Elementary and secondary schools are also required to provide assistance that will achieve English proficiency based on the state's English language proficiency assessment and help that student population meet the challenging state academic standards. To continue, you're also having to show that you're working with and promoting parent, family, and community engagement. You're also assuring that you're complying with Section 1112E. Okay, side note, 1112E is part of Title I, and that's just basically the parent's right to know portion of the Title I. You're saying that's all the 1112E is. It's the parent's right to know component of Title I. B, you're making sure that you are not in any violation of state law regarding how you are educating English learners. C, you are creating this plan through consultation with teachers, researchers, school administrators, parents and family members, community members, public or private entities, and institutions of higher ed in developing and implementing the plan. So it's not just one group of folks in a room that sat down and we are all the principals and we're creating this plan. You have all stakeholders involved. And then lastly, you're coordinating activities and you're sharing relevant data. And now the sharing of that data would also include Head Start, Early Head Start, your migrant and seasonal Head Start agencies and other agencies and entities. Those are the local plan requirements under ESSA. So if you're not doing those things as you go forward, because you are clicking off in that box within your federal consolidated application, attesting to you doing these things. So if you're not, when you're planning for next year, make sure that you have a look at that. Section 3121 is the reporting section, a reporting category within the statute under Title III, specifically called Subpart 2, Accountability and Administration. Now, this is actually another way of saying this is the program evaluation requirement portion of the statute. Section 3121 says that if you're receiving this funding from the state educational agency, you are making sure that you're including a description of the programs and activities conducted, the number of percentage of English learners in the programs who are making progress towards achieving English language proficiency, the number and percentage of children in the programs and activities attaining English proficiency based on the state English language proficiency standards. You're also reporting or evaluating the number and percentage of English learners who exit the language instruction educational programs, the number and percentage of English learners meeting the challenging state academic content and student academic achievement standards for each of the 4 years after such children are no longer receiving services. So that's a portion of the statute that sometimes gets left out. Make sure that you keep up with the students even after they exit the program. You're required to do so for 4 years. Number 6 says the number and percentage of English learners who have not attained English language proficiency within 5 years of initial classification. And then number 7 is the lovely catch-all that we always see in statute, any other information that the state educational agency may require. So when you're thinking about your program and whether or not you are doing everything that you're supposed to, this usually also can be mirrored within the compliance report that we have to do every year as well. This is where this is coming from. The compliance report pieces, the data that you're having to actually report, you evaluating your program. This comes from Section 3121 for Title III, which spells out in 7 lovely things, 7 being a catch-all, the things that you are required to submit to the agency so that they can, in fact, do their reports to submit to the U.S. Department of Education. Now, I say this each time, but I just want to remind you that with the program evaluation process, there is not a prescribed way to do this. You can evaluate the program in any way you see fit. You just have to make sure you're evaluating the program. Federal statute, Texas Education Code, TAC, nothing actually spells out exactly how you are required to evaluate the program. They just care that you evaluate it. You want to make sure that when you are evaluating your program that you are using multiple measures of data and that they are both quantitative and qualitative. You want to make sure that you're including your baseline data. If you did not collect baseline data this year, let's say this is the first time you are going into this role and now you're looking here at the end of the year, you're evaluating all of the strategies, activities that you've done towards your Title III program, and you realize you don't have enough data. let's say you didn't actually start off with your baseline data, which gives you at this moment in time, how are our kiddos doing right now before we start to implement this program. As you plan for next year, plan to collect more data. Your data can be collected from fund sources, budget summaries, your CNA, definitely, because as with all federal funding and even state funding, you are required to do some kind of comprehensive needs assessment because it allows you to be able to definitively pull, these are the needs that we have as an LEA at this moment in time. You can also pull your CIP when you're thinking about data evaluation for your program, because that lets you know, based on the needs that we have, these activities are the plan of action we're taking to address those needs. When you're evaluating, what you're trying to do is look at what you set out to do, what I actually accomplished, and then to what degree it was accomplished. That's it. That's program evaluation in a nutshell. What I'm going to show you now is a 5-step process that was recommended by the agency, the TEA, when we were still under Nickleby, No Child Left Behind. Again, there is not a specific way that you evaluate. They just want you to evaluate. This program evaluation process that was recommended previously starts off of the 5 steps with listing your needs. Then you go on to identifying your strategies, identifying the funds, reviewing the data, and then lastly, evaluating the impact of the program itself. So let's look at these individually. With step 1, listing the needs, it says list the needs identified within the comprehensive needs assessment. It's fairly easy. You go back to your CNA because at the beginning of the year, these are the things that you identified as a need based on your student population. Now, your CNA may have changed throughout the year because if you suddenly had a change in the population that you're serving, if it could be you have more kiddos, it could be you have less kiddos, it could be you have more of one population than another, you should be reevaluating and looking at your needs regularly. This is not I did the CNA, I laminated, that's it, we're not touching it again. Your CNA and your CIP are living, breathing, editable documents that should be edited as required. You see a screenshot here on the screen of the CNA toolkit or guide, and this sheet was what was offered when we were still under Nickleby. Now, I show this because there's nothing wrong with this toolkit. The only thing that will change is that there at the top, you see it says student achievement. That's no longer applicable. That was part of the 8 focus areas when we were under No Child Left Behind. Under ESSA, we don't look at just that 1 of 8 category anymore. They're now, when you're thinking about CNAs, it's been kind of condensed to a 4 category system. So that's the only thing that would really be different. But everything else, it's just a tool sheet. It's just a guide that you can use to help kind of standardize your thinking. Pulling your data sources and finding out which ones you reviewed, that's still required. If you looked at the back of this program evaluation sheet here, this tool guide that was provided when we were still under No Child Left Behind, identifying the strengths and your opportunities for growth or your needs, that's still required in the CNA. Summarizing your needs and identifying which ones are your biggest bang for your buck. So prioritizing the needs, again, that's still required because that's just part of the CNA. So if you want to use this tool sheet, even though it has the Nickleby down there in the corner, feel free to do so. Just, white out No Child Left Behind program series if you would like to, because the process is still the process. Step 2 says identify your strategies. So using your district and or campus improvement plan, identify strategies or initiatives that address these program needs and were connected to this federal program. I screenshot in just a generic campus improvement plan template. There's nothing special about it, but when you're identifying strategies, you're going directly to your CIP or your DIP. And from there, you're pulling out what specific strategies you put into place to address the needs that you have for this specific population. So for your Title III funding recipient population, what strategies did you do to address the needs? When you're looking at your improvement plan, you see strategies and action steps that are there. You're just pulling those out individually. Which ones did you use that supported this program? And then after you pull those out, you do your continue on with your program evaluation process. Step 3 is identifying your funds. So identify the amount of funds expended to implement the strategy or initiative, if applicable. So when you're looking at your improvement plans, be it your district or campus, you pull out your strategies, you're looking at the resources column, because under the resources column is where you should have identified your funding. Now, it's not necessarily down to the penny. It's not, $3,142.18. But you do want to make sure that whatever funding is there, you're reflecting that when you're evaluating the program at the end. That's just a general, this is how much we anticipate it costing in order for us to implement this specific strategy or action. Some funding sources require that it be reflected in the plan as well. So when you're thinking about like your state allotments, because your improvement plan is an auditable document, it is required that you have some of those resources reflected in the plan itself. So when I'm identifying my funding that I spent for this particular program or that I'm trying to charge to the Title III funding program, have a look at your improvement plan, have a look at your budget summary reports, because this is just another source documentation or support to show that you were actually doing everything that you attested to when you signed off to receive that grant funding. Step 4 is reviewing your data. Review data identified to measure the fidelity of the implementation and the impact of the strategy or initiative on student outcomes. As always, when we're thinking about funding, especially federal, but also with your state, it all comes back to student achievement. I screenshot in another example of the CNA toolkit guidance document that was there, because again, when you're looking at reviewing your data, that comes from your data sources review portion of your CNA. You can also pull data from your improvement plan, district, campus, student achievement summary reports, budget reports. You can pull data from sign-in sheets. You can pull data from surveys, your meeting minutes, if you have trend data from the last year to this year, or even from September to, say now. What are you pulling? What are you noticing based on the data that you have available to you? So don't think that your data has to be from one source all the time. We want to use multiple measures of data, and they should come from a variety of places. This here is just a curriculum assessment screenshot that's in there, just as a reminder again, that data does not look one way. You can pull from a variety of places. And I mentioned surveys earlier, but considering the fact that with this very specific grant funding, Title III, really does go into and wants to see what you are doing with your parents and your families and community members, other stakeholders. So if you are having surveys at the end of, let's say, family literacy nights, pull that data. That's data to help with supporting whether or not you invested resources into that family literacy night. Well, the survey data that those family members and other stakeholders filled out will provide another source of data for you to either support continuing having this night, or maybe saying we need to alter it or get rid of it altogether. And step 5 is evaluating the impact. So you want to evaluate the impact and make recommendations for continuation or modification of the strategy or initiative. So what's there is just a heat map, nothing special about it. I just screenshot in a heat map. Part of the reason why I have this here is because when you're evaluating the impact, you want to see over time whether or not the resources that you invested in that program were worthy of the investment. And the resources can be financial, it could be time, staff. You want to make sure that that particular resource that you invested into that strategy or action or initiative was worthy of it. So step 5, I've gone ahead, I looked at my needs again to kind of refresh, make sure we were on track with that. We went ahead, and then from there, we looked at data, we looked at funding, we decided, we reviewed the data further, deciding whether or not, lastly, with the evaluation of the impact, it was worth actually investing the resources into it. And now at the evaluation impact stage, the last thing you're doing is just, as a committee, saying, is this program or action or initiative one that we want to continue into the next year? If you find that your data review shows definitively, or maybe not as definitively, but just shows that overall this particular program, this action, this strategy was not as beneficial to our students as we thought, it's not a bad thing. Just document it. And with evaluating the impact, you may decide from here, we're just not going to offer this strategy anymore, which is fine. But don't not reflect or evaluate the program or show the overall results of it because they did not turn out to be what you thought. Not all strategies work with all kiddos, as we know. So if for some reason the data does not strongly support you continuing it, just reflect it in the report and just show that this is something that maybe we will cease to do, or maybe we'll continue it based on the data, but with just some modifications. So again, that's a quick overview of the 5-step program evaluation process that was recommended by the agency when we were still under No Child Left Behind. Again, there is not a prescribed way of doing this, so you can evaluate it in the manner that you see fit. Just make sure that you're evaluating and that you're reporting it. So what you see on the screen is reasonable, necessary, allowable, and applicable. I have Title I Part A there because that phrase is typically, referred to with Title I Part A. However, these are just good overall practices to think about when you're trying to charge expenditures to federal funding. So I want to show you these again, just things to keep in mind as you're evaluating your program. Reasonable means that the cost is a type generally recognized as ordinary and necessary for the operation of the organization or the grant. Restrictions or requirements are imposed and for generally accepted sound business practices, making sure that the individuals are acting with prudence in the circumstances of responsibility, and there are no significant deviations from established practices of the organization. Those are just kind of qualifiers when you're thinking about what would be considered reasonable and necessary. Allowable, to be allowable to be charged to a grant, it has to meet following criteria. It has to be reasonable for the performance and applicable under the applicable cost principles. You should be conforming to limitations or exclusions set forth in the cost principles. You should be consistent with policies and procedures that apply uniformly. And that one is the one that kind of sometimes people get in trouble with, because your policies and procedures should be consistent across the board, regardless if it's with charging for your federal or your state funded activities. To be allowable, it should also be accorded consistent treatment among all other grant programs, be determined to be in accordance with GAAP, which is your generally accepted accounting principles, not be included as a cost or used to meet cost sharing or matching requirements, and not be used for lease purchases. Now, the last portion of this, allocable, the following guidelines may apply to allocable cost. A cost is allocable if to a particular grant in accordance with benefits received, if it consistently meets the following. It is incurred specifically for the grant and benefits both the grant and the work. And any cost allocable to a particular grant or the cost objective may not be shifted to other federal awards to overcome funding deficiencies or to avoid restrictions imposed by law or by the terms of the grant award. So what you see here on the following slide are going to be just some kind of things to keep in mind with Title I Part A specifically. So I'm going to skip that one. I'm also going to skip this slide because it goes over, again, allowable Title I programs. In general, make sure that those reasonable, necessary, allowable, and allocable, even though it's specific to Title I Part A, those are, again, just kind of general best practices to consider when you're thinking, can I charge a cost expenditure to your actual grant funded source? So specifically here, we're talking about Title III, but it's not a bad thing to keep those in mind, okay? Now I'm going to show you some sample program expenditures. So these are examples that we get questions on, and as to whether or not we can actually charge this to Title III. Well, Title III Part A. Here's the first example. Lily is the assistant principal at a middle school in the region. She recently attended a conference and learned about a new software that boasts tremendous gains for English learners and immigrant children. She wants to pair this computer-aided technology with teacher-led tutorials. Can she charge this to the Title III grant-funded program? Yes, you can. Now, this one is found under 3115 authorized subgrantee activities, subsection D, which is the authorized portion. I'm showing you this because sometimes we default to the required piece portion, which I went over with you earlier. But these are authorized activities that you can do under Title III. So with what we just described, with that scenario, she's allowed to do so because if you look at number 2 there, she would be improving the instructional program for English learners by identifying, acquiring, and upgrading curriculum, instructional materials, and educational software and assessment procedures. In addition, number 3 says that she is, or she would be, complying with providing to English learners tutorials in academic or career and technical education, and intensifying in the instruction, which may include materials in a language that the student can understand, interpreters, and translators. Okay, so with the authorized subgrantee activities, these are what you would consider mays if you think back to Title I as well. These are things that she may do on her campus because they're authorized. They're not required, but she may do these. Let's look at our next example. Becky is in charge of creating the professional development calendar for the upcoming school year. She has a phenomenal presenter lined up who specializes in improving the academic achievement for English learners and immigrant children. She wants to have the speaker facilitate their session to the entire staff, but she's concerned about funding. Is she allowed to do this and charge this to Title III? This is something that you should remember from the required subgrantee activities portion. We are required to provide effective professional development to classroom teachers, including teachers in the classroom settings that are not of language instruction educational programs. So she can do this. She is in fact required to make sure that teachers are receiving professional development specific to this population. It's not just based on the language instructional program. We want to make sure that this professional development is designed to improve the instruction and assessment of English learners and designed to enhance the ability of teachers, principals, and other school leaders to understand and implement curricula, assessment practices and measures, and instructional strategies for English learners. Here's our next example. Tony oversees the teacher mentoring program at Oliver High School. Each new teacher is assigned a specific mentor who serves in their field on the campus. As part of their monthly professional learning time, Tony wants to add a new segment which would provide all participants with actionable strategies geared at improving student achievement for the English learners and immigrant youth they serve. Is this allowable? And can she charge it to the grant? Yes, you can. This is, again, part of your required subgrantee activities. Provide effective PD to classroom teachers, principals, and other school leaders over D, making sure that D, it's sufficient intensity and duration. So what they made a point of emphasizing here, in the past, there were some LEAs that were spending a significant amount of their funding for phenomenal speakers, but they were, back to school, one time only kind of professional developments. So as you see here within ESSA, they don't want you to do that. That change has been pretty prevalent throughout all of the ESSA statute, but making sure that if you're utilizing this funding, that it has sufficient intensity and duration to have a positive and lasting impact on the teacher's performance in the classroom. So with the example provided, with Tony wanting to offer a PD and having it each time they meet, like during that monthly professional learning time, because that would be geared towards having a positive and lasting impact on a teacher's performance in the classroom, then yes, that's something she would be allowed to do. Next example. Jayla is the Family and Community Outreach Coordinator at Douglas Elementary School. As part of the family engagement series that Douglas offers monthly, Jayla wants to provide family literacy services. These services would be free to all who wants to attend. What do you think? This one's tricky. The reason why is because of the way the question was actually worded. It says here she wants to offer family engagement services and provide family literacy services. What's tricky about this example is that there's nothing that specifically says that it's going to be working and benefiting specifically the population that this particular grant is developed for, which would be your Title III kiddos, which would be your English learners and your immigrant children and youth. Just saying I'm offering family literacy services, it's not enough because, and that's not enough to just be charged to Title III, because you're required to do that under Title I Part A. So this one is a little tricky. It's a yes and, or a yes but, I guess would be another way of saying it. As long as Jayla could show that she was providing something that was enhancing or supplementing language instruction for English learners that's specific to this population, and specific to this population's parents, family, and community engagement, that is specific to family literacy services, outreach and training to this specific English learners population to improve English language skills of English learners and to assist parents and families in helping their children improve their academic achievement, and will also help the families and other stakeholders become more active in the education of their kiddos, then yes, she can use this funding for that. However, as initially questioned, just general family literacy services, no, that would not be enough, because that is something that you would be required to do under Title I Part A with your family and community engagement services. But if she added additional qualifiers, then yes, she could do so. So how would I evaluate this? I'm going to use the example of the long-lasting instructional impact. So that's the example of Tony. She's at Oliver High School. She wants to provide, during their monthly professional learning time, a new segment which would have actionable strategies geared at improving student academic achievement for English learners and the immigrant youth that they serve. So how would I evaluate it? If I'm using the 5 steps that we were offered to use as an example under Nickleby, I would look at the needs. I am assuming, and I guess I shouldn't assume, but since this came from the campus and I did have this discussion too, I'm assuming that this is reflected in your CNA, because the first thing you would do would be to look at the needs. So if I'm looking at the needs and it's identified at Oliver High School that the teaching staff needs additional assistance working specifically with their Title III kiddos, their English learners, and their immigrant children and youth, then I can say, oh, it's part of the need. The second step would be to look at the strategies. So I can there say, hey, one of the strategies that we're using to help address the need of providing and improving student achievement based on the instructional services being provided by the teachers, I could then pull from their improvement plan those strategies that specifically references the mentoring program and additional monthly professional development, because it's going to be over time and have a long-lasting impact. I then will look at the funding. So then I can say, how much did it cost in order for us to have this professional learning opportunity monthly, which would include actionable strategies to meet the needs of this specific population. I would then look at the data. I would look at my baseline data. How were these students performing and how were the teachers performing prior to me implementing this monthly professional development that's specific with strategies to this population with the teaching staff that are there. So how did they do initially before we started getting that baseline data? I can check in periodically. How are they doing throughout the implementation of the program? And then at the very end, this time, and I'm evaluating the mentoring professional development program, I could say, based on the data, either this supports us continuing this, or it supports continuation with some modifications. Maybe the professional learning time, we want to switch that to being first thing in the morning. Maybe that's first period of the day. We're finding that teachers maybe aren't retaining as much when we do it at the last period of the day, whatever the case may be. Maybe that's the adjustment that I might make. Or I may find when we're reviewing the data and evaluating the impact that the impact wasn't great enough for me to continue this program. And if that's what I find, that's what I find. I would just reflect it in my report. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It just means that maybe the specific strategies, those actionable strategies that we were using during this mentoring professional learning time weren't the best ones to use for our specific population. That is a quick way of being able to evaluate this specific action or strategy. What I would do is to implement those 5 steps with each of the actions or strategies that are specific to our Title III kiddos, our English learners, and our immigrant youth within that improvement plan. And then I would do that for each one to decide whether or not this program at large was one that we want to continue. That's it. If you want a more detailed version of how to actually evaluate a program, I would suggest that you visit our online learning center. And there you'll find general techniques for evaluating the program. And that one can be found, again, within the online learning center. Same time, it's about 45 minutes to an hour, but it does allow you a more thorough view as to why you would evaluate and how you could evaluate your program. So what I want to show you now is the schedule as well as the compliance report that comes along with Title III Part A. Under ESSA, your English Language Acquisition Act, your Title III Part A was Program Schedule 3106. So at the beginning of the year, this is what we said we were doing. And I just screenshot a couple of things, but you'll see here, the first part talks about your local plan. Again, we looked at the local plan earlier. That's the reason why I wanted to show that to you, pulled directly from ESSA, because that is what we're saying we are doing where we're accepting these federal grant funding at the organization or the LEA level before it trickles down to what the individual campuses are doing as well. So what you'll see here is a screenshot of the direct application. I pulled this from one of our LEAs. I, of course, left out their identifiable information, but providing supplemental upgrades to the program, having measurable objectives, providing supplemental curricular, instructional, educational software procedures, tutorials are there for career and technical education, developing and implementing effective preschool, elementary, or second language instruction, and supplemental community participation for family literacy and or parent and family outreach. You see, this comes exactly from the local plan requirements, and then, you know, from what's allowed as a must, required, and then what's a may. This is another page of it. This goes into professional development, which we looked at as well. So here, this particular LEA had an opportunity to go ahead and put in, this is professional development that we anticipate doing. This is the purpose. These are the areas of effectiveness and the audience. Again, this comes directly from statute. So know that this does have a continuation across the board. When you're saying I'm doing these things, you're putting it in the plan. It is important that you're following through with it because it does affect us as an LEA, as an organization at whole, because we are saying we're doing these when we accept the funding. This is a screenshot of the program schedule. It continues on. I'm not going to read through all of this with you. I just wanted you to see that this was here, and then this is a part of what you're saying you are doing. This here is a screenshot, and this one came from Nickleby, but this was just the evaluation report. You're making sure that you're actually in compliance. So this was a screenshot of the compliance report. And again, it's just, are you doing what you said you were doing? That's it. I'm going to go into closing with you now. So upcoming program evaluation series sessions, there are 3 remaining for the program evaluation series 2018. Next week, we'll be covering Title III, but Part B, specific to immigrant. Then we'll continue with Title IV, Part A, which is your student support and academic enrichment, and end on June 4th with Title V, Part B, which is the Rural Education Initiative. If you want to have a look at resources, I'm an advocate of getting information straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. So please have a look at ESSA. You can go to the U.S. Department of Education if you'd like, download it from there. There are some cheat sheets that go over just Title III Part A or just Title III Part B if you'd like, but pull the statute because that is a great place to start to find out what is required of you, what you are saying you're going to do if you accept the funding, and what are options. If you go on our Title I Part A site, which is region10.org/Title I, and scroll all the way down, you'll find a tab for the Nickleby program evaluation and the program evaluation tool. As I said earlier, this still says No Child Left Behind on it because there is nothing on this guidance tool or the guidance booklet itself that is specific or so specific to No Child Left Behind that you cannot use it as a template for evaluating your program under ESSA, because the evaluation process is the evaluation process. Just take out the No Child Left Behind if it'll make you feel better on the spreadsheet. And just know that instead of the 8 areas of focus that were there, say for your CNA, we've now transitioned into a different format. But the spreadsheet itself, with pulling your data, pulling your needs, evaluating your impact, those 5 steps that we looked at earlier, you can still pull it all from the program evaluation booklet. That stuff is exactly the same. Region10.org, again, /Title I gives you more details of the guidance booklet itself, along with the tool sheet. If we did not cover anything during this time together that you want to know more about, please feel free to reach out to me. That's what we are here for. Here's our team. We have Tony Garrett. She's a program coordinator for the Title I Capacity Building Initiative. Laura Griffin is the program coordinator for PNP, private nonprofit. Becky Book is a consultant for state allotments as well as ESSA, the ESSA SSA. I am there in the middle, Lauren McKinney. I'm a consultant for ESSA as well as the SSA, and as is Jodelle Bland there on the right. She's also a consultant for ESSA and the SSA. This has been the Program Evaluation Series, Title III, Part A, English Language Acquisition, Language Enhancement, and Academic Achievement Act. Thank you very much for your time today. If you have any further questions, if you need additional assistance, or if there's just anything else we can be of assistance with, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing the Region 10 ESC to continue to be of service to you. Have an awesome day.